Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This presentation is being recorded and will run approximately 60 minutes, including question and answering time at the end. It will also be available in the Events Industry Council's Knowledge Hub, and all attendees today will receive their CEs approximately 1 week after the webinar. Before I turn things over to our CEO, I would like to address a few logistical items. Attendees can listen to the webinar through their computers or by dialing in using the number and passcode provided by the Zoom software. If you have any questions, you do not need to wait until the end of the presentation to submit them. We always encourage you to submit your questions using the question box seen on the screen. You can also upvote questions that you would like also to be asked. We will address as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. Lastly, we are also pleased to introduce a closed captioning tool. You can access closed captioning by clicking the CC closed captioning icon on the bottom right of the screen and press Show Subtitles. And now I'll hand it over to our CEO, Amy Calvert.
Thanks, Derek. So just wanted to say hello to everyone and wish you all a good day, and thank you for joining us. We have a fantastic crowd. I've been so really encouraged and grateful for the support for our digital and online programming. I think it's been really fantastic to see how the communities come together, and is really encouraging to see the support that all of you are offering one another during this time. So I think the topic today is just really so timely. I think it's so important for us. We're facing challenges relative to this global pandemic that are unprecedented. And even in that time, we know that this community and this there's a moment for us to kind of come together and reflect on that which we do have control over, and that is thinking about what's important to us as individuals and what are the learnings that have presented themselves through this crisis for all of us to sort of think about and help move us forward as we grow and we learn and we adapt to this new reality. So again, just want to thank you guys for making time for this great program. I want to thank our panelists. I also want to thank our moderator, Christine Feynman, who's not only been a champion of the CMP, but just been a fantastic leader and mentor to so many in the global events industry. And many of you know her from her work at Marriott International, but she really behind the scenes is always available to mentor a student or a young person coming into this profession. And so I'm really grateful for her leadership and proud of all the things that she does to move our industry forward. So great hands today with these fantastic folks, and I'm sure you're going to learn a great deal. And I look forward to connecting with you all again very soon. And be well and take good care. Christine?
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for your kind words. And welcome everyone to today's webinar, Take Control of Your Career in Times of Uncertainty, which is being presented by Tammy Chapik, Dr. Brandy Stankovic, and Nicole Brusewitz. Before we would begin, I would like to thank the Events Industry Council for hosting such a timely webinar, as Amy said. These are indeed uncharted waters. Thus, our presenters today will share with each of us the importance of remaining focused, as well as what it means to strategically plan for your future career. It is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Tammy Chapik is the founder and head coach of We Inspire We, a unique leadership and career coaching organization, which is dedicated to supporting leaders, regardless of title or tenure, in their plight to rise up by harnessing inner strengths and tapping into true potential. Tammy empowers her clients to transcend their current selves and amplify their impact on the world around them. Next, we have Dr. Brandy Stankovic, who's an organizational change expert, motivational speaker, artist, and mom, and inspires firms globally with her models of leadership, engagement, and award-winning education. She is the Chief Strategy Officer at CU Solutions Group. And also we have Nicole Brusewitz, who has spent more than 18 years as an award-winning education and events professional who specializes in developing meaningful learning experiences to grow one's career, both in the classroom and beyond. She is exceptionally passionate about women and leadership wellness, community service projects, and financial cooperatives. Nicole is also a CMP. Thank you so much for your time today, ladies. We truly appreciate your insights, and we look forward to the hour ahead. And Tammy, we're going to allow you to take it away.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here. If we can go ahead and jump to the next slide. I'll let that catch up with us. This is just a little bit of my intro. I wanted to just share with you all my information. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. It looks like the formatting might have gotten a little wonky, but my whole platform, my whole belief is that we are all leaders, regardless of where we are in our careers, where we are with our age, our gender, tenure, doesn't really matter, because leading essentially is the act of moving ourselves, moving things forward. And certainly in these uncertain times, we all have such a significant opportunity to really step ourselves into a leadership role of ourselves, our families, those around us, and really navigate these difficulties, or what we might call change. So if you go to the next slide, please. We know that this pandemic has truly been challenging for everybody. There's lots of what ifs out there, whether we are happy in our current role but concerned for the future, maybe we're ready for a new role but not sure even if there are any opportunities out there, or maybe we're between jobs. Regardless of where we are in that spectrum, we know that change is something that's quite difficult for most people to embrace. I wanted to share this model with you because it is a process, right? Change is not just a flip of the fingers or the light switch or the whatever. It is a process to go from where we are now at the end of something into something new, right? And that transition. We can think about it often, kind of a comical little way to visualize it is if we were on a trapeze. You're in your comfortable, safe space right now, right? But you need to get to that other side. So for you to get from one side of that trapeze to the next, there is a period of floating. There's a period of letting go. And even though it is a leap of faith, you can make it to the other side, and maybe if there's a net underneath you, there's some confidence there, but it still is scary. And I would argue that we're probably all in a little bit of this neutral zone right now, in this floating space where we're ending some things in our lives, or trying to work through our sadness or anxiety or nervousness, whatever is kind of coming at us with where we are in our careers or next steps of the pandemic, if you will. And into this floating stage of what's going to happen. What is our new normal? What does that really look like? And then thinking about, when we get into that space, with the gratification and satisfaction and what can really come next for us. So I just want to kind of layer this in and start us out with understanding that we're all in the midst of a cycle of change, regardless of where we are, and that this constant uncertainty will be a part of our lives for a bit. And it's no wonder really that all of our nerves are high, and there's lots of kind of what ifs and questions that we're all facing as we move ourselves forward. So next slide, please. What if I told you that this change, the cycle of change, even though we're in the bit of this neutral zone, floating zone right now, really is an opportunity for all of us to navigate what is the best next step for us in our futures. We know that change is very uncomfortable, very difficult, but there's tons of upside around it, right? Like, it allows us to determine what's working for us, what isn't working. It allows us to step into greater success, maybe financially, maybe professionally, whatever that looks like. It allows us to consider what would be better for us from levels of satisfaction, both personal and professional, and certainly allows us to make changes in our lives that can make things much easier. Change is definitely difficult. Even people who say they love change truly don't love change. We know that change is inevitable, and regardless, it's going to happen in our lives. And I would argue the only person that really truly loves change is a baby with a wet diaper, right? Like, we all have some angst and some uncertainty about what change really means. But what if I told you that change just means that we're getting ourselves to a place of choice? In everything that we do in life, we have choice, and really we have choice in how we show up. We might not always love the consequences around choice, but we have the ability to really navigate that for ourselves and really handle ourselves in the best way possible. So what if this situation was really an opportunity for all of us to try something new, for us to grow, to really dig deep inside and ask ourselves, what is it that we really want? Or what are our chances to learn something new, get a new skill, or sharpen an existing one? I would argue that during this time of opportunity, if you will, not of change, right, is allow for us to really step into our personal power and be exactly what we want to be. So next slide, please. So you ask then, how do I do that, right? How do I figure out what this opportunity is for me and what I really want to do during this time? And I would say that we really need to kind of take a deep dive into understanding what our value is, as well as what our values are. And the combination of those things together can really allow you to make the most of this opportunity and the change and uncertainty that's happening around us. So the first part is understanding the who we are, right? What is your value? What is your worth? What are you bringing to the table? What gifts and what strengths and what skills do you already have? What makes you special and unique? And I would say all too often, the vast majority of people undermine or undervalue what you're actually bringing to the table. Nobody in the world has the same skills, gifts, experiences that you do. Nobody. So you're bringing something very different, unique, and beautiful to the table that nobody else really is doing as well. The second part of it is understanding your values. So what matters to you most? Certainly you might have skills that you can functionally do, but that doesn't mean that you love doing them or that you want to do them more of it, right? So it's really kind of taking a deep dive assessment into what are the things that give you the most satisfaction and joy in your life, as well as in your professional world, and figuring out how to do more of them. If you're familiar with the term of being in flow, that's the place that we want more of, right? You want to be in this place where you totally lose track of time because you just are enjoying so much of what you're doing. So we really want to understand, what are those things? What are those things that matter to you most? What's your passion? What's your purpose? Where does your energy come from? And the more we can align you to those things, the greater happiness and satisfaction you'll have in your life. And that is scientifically proven, by the way, and I can share that if anybody wants that information later. Where the magic really happens is when you can bring together your value, so the things that you do with your values matters most, and can really step then into this power, this opportunity that you have to be the best version of yourself. This is kind of where we bring your head and your heart together and really listen to our intuition, our instincts, and what can really challenge us and to take on what that next new opportunity is and that next best step for you is. This is where it might mean a career shift or getting a new job or raising your hand for a promotion or new responsibilities at your work. This is the chance for you to kind of level set on what it is that you really want and start to bring that path forward. Now, how do you do that, right? And I would argue the very first thing that anybody and everybody needs to do once you have clarity in what it is that you really want is to network. So if you go to the next slide, please. It really is a core part of any career success plan ever, right? And networking should be happening all the time, not just when you need a job or not just when you're trying to advance a new skill set. Networking at the heart of what it is really all about building relationships and making connections with others where you can bring value to them and they can bring value to you. It's not about hey, I met you at a meeting, I gave you my business card, and now you're going to hire me. That is absolutely not the case, right? Networking is really about making connections with people that matter, where you can demonstrate your expertise and skill to help them out and vice versa. There's tons of upside to networking. I have a nice little laundry list here. I'm not going to read it to you, but it's really important to think about networking, not just as going to these big events, especially now that we can't go to these in-person events, but networking is truly about the art of making connections. That can happen in a one-on-one basis. That can happen virtually. That can happen in big group settings, but it's really important that we do that to advance ourselves in our current companies, if we want to look for something outside of our current company, especially if we want to change industries into something new. It can be about research, it can be about gaining new insights, and it can certainly also be about building up your credibility and your confidence and seeing what else is out there. Next slide. So I want to share some real practical tips, some good takeaways for you on how to be effective with networking. My dad was in carpentry, and he would always say, you must measure twice and cut once. And as a child, I never understood what that meant, but I would say that is what the art of networking is, right? If you can have a plan going into it while you're doing it and to follow it, then you're going to be just fine, right? So I'm going to give examples around in-person networking events, but the same information holds true for virtual. It same holds true for one-on-one, because it really is about making sure that you know what it is that you're trying to accomplish and then working towards that goal. So before any kind of networking outreach, whether again it's an in-person event or something virtual, you really need to be prepared. You need to know who it is that you want to talk to. You need to know why. You need to honestly set your definition of what success for that event or that conversation is. If you can set those little things in motion, then it makes it so much easier to make those real relationships and those real connections. You want to do your research, you want to do your homework, know who you're engaging with and why, and have a couple of questions or have a point of view that you want to share with them ready to go. If it is an in-person event, have a couple of canned questions ready to go, and not just how's the weather today or where are you going on vacation next week, but some really truly thought-provoking questions that will allow people to engage in true conversation. When you're at the event, obviously you want to bring whatever your goal was to life. You want to bring that level of success to the table and start to activate on that plan. But really think about it as relationship building, right? It is about you making real connections, not just about trying to sell something or not just trying about to get a new job. It's about making those real connections. Make notes on the person that you met so that you can follow up, which is truly the most important next step, which is, after those events, after those encounters, make those LinkedIn connections, send the follow-up email, send the follow-up call, get that coffee scheduled or whatever the next step really is. And you might think I have a typo on this slide, keep the connection warm twice, right? But I have it on here twice on purpose, right? You want to keep that connection and you want to keep it warm, right? It's not just about a one and done situation. You want it to be a long-term relationship, long-term follow-up, and something where you're just bringing value to them and vice versa. When we think about networking, as I mentioned, it is a mission critical step to be integrated into anybody's career advancement role, certainly as you think about where you are today in your current company and into future growth opportunities as well. And so I hope some of these tips were helpful for you. If you flip to the next slide, I just want to kind of land on, so what do you do now that you've had some time to assess your values, the value, your opportunity of what you want to do for yourself? We want to think about networking, and we're in a situation where we're not really able to go to these events and kind of meet people blindly. So I want to encourage you guys to think about who it is that you want to meet, why you want to meet them, what companies are exciting for you, what opportunities are exciting for you, and start to make a plan on how to go after them. Baby steps, right? My favorite quote in the whole world is, a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? So once you have that plan set in motion, once you have that vision of what it is that you're looking for, start to build that baby step plan out and start to take action on it. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Hi there. This is Chris Peck, Education Director, and there are a couple questions. Thank you so much, Tammy. For example, do you have some networking tips related to the virtual world, just a little further that you can share?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of depends on the situation, right? So if you're looking for a new job at a specific company, or you're curious about what a job in this type of role would look like that you don't actually have that experience, that's where you really want to get onto LinkedIn or any other social media channel and find someone who works at that company, find someone who does that job already, and just do a blind outreach. Or if you know someone who already knows them, ask them to make a connection for you. What you don't want to do is come at it and say, hi, I'm Tammy and I'd love to meet you because I want you to hire me for this next role. What you really want to do is come at it from a really personable and a value-oriented perspective, right? So coming at it from, I'd love to meet you. I see you've been, really impressive in your career. I'd love to hear about how you've gotten to where you've gotten today. Or I'm super impressed by your organization. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what it's like on the inside. So if you can come at it from a way that doesn't feel so needy, most people are very willing to help out. Most people are very willing to talk about themselves too. So that's one way to go about doing it, in addition to, of course, asking someone to make a connection for you.
Sure. So a follow-up question, and always something that we see and hear about, is networking tips for introverts.
Yeah, I love that question, because I think, we're all somewhere in the spectrum, right? Whether we get our energy from other people or not. It's really about how comfortable and confident we are going into these events. And again, virtual is the same as in person. One thing that's super important is to have that plan in place. So you might set a very small goal for yourself to have 2 conversations, or to collect 5 business cards, or whatever those things are, but having that goal before going into it, and then having the set of questions already ready to go to, that really helps kind of break down some of the angst around, what do I say? Do I have to put myself out there? How do I put myself out there? A couple of other tips is really around your energy going into it. So if you have a favorite song you want to listen to as you're walking into the room or before you make the phone call, do that to get your energy up. I love the superhero pose for that same exact purpose, just to shift your energy and get the blood flowing in a different way. Another thing that really helps is if you think about the networking conversation as a relationship, not about trying to get something out of it, or being afraid to kind of make a bad first impression, or whatever that might look like. So if it's truly about making a connection and making a new, friend, then it changes the dynamics and how you bring yourself to the table as well.
Good. And then a last one, how can you really demonstrate your skills if you're new to the industry or new to your role?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly it's going to vary by where you are in the interactions that you have, but a huge part of it is visibility. So having conversations with your boss, having conversations with the leadership team above and around them, and peers at your level, it's really about making sure people know who you are and understand what it is that you do and where your passion and your energy and past experience really lies. And then certainly proof will be in the pudding, right? The more that you do the great work that you were brought in to do, the better off you'll be. But don't hesitate to promote and self-promote the things that you're doing with those people around you, because it's important for them to really see that value, especially right now when most of us are work from home and they can't physically see you every day. It's important to share those wins along the way.
Super. Thank you very much, Tammy.
Thank you. So I think with that, we roll to Brandy.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I actually saw in some of the chat windows and things as people are saying hello, I want to give a shout out to Margaret and Celine and Sarah from Nevada, because I am also coming at you from Las Vegas. So hello to all of my friends, international and domestic. It's really great that you're here to talk with us about this topic. And thank you so much to the team who put on such incredible events. And so I get to transition it from Tammy to how we talk about what this means from an organizational impact. And so I will take into account some of the questions that I see popping up, as well as the questions that you're asking of her, of how do we create that value? And I love how Tammy framed it of the new normal. So we have this new normal. There's nothing that any of us can do that are on this webinar discussion call today, or if you're watching this in archive, can change the way that the environment has impacted businesses, impacted events over the last couple of months. I know that it has completely shifted my life, and I'm confident that it's completely shifted all of yours. And so I think it's Nicole, who is going to be talking to us next, has framed it as we aren't all in the same boat, but we're definitely all in the same storm. And I like that frame. So the way that I want to start, if we go to the first slide, the first bullet there, is to think big. And a few of you asked, what do we do in this environment around how do we create value? Or even saw a question around, if I was furloughed immediately, how do I continue to create value if I don't have control over what's happening in the organization or how I get there? And I can't urge everyone enough to think big. And what I mean by that is it's certainly strategic, but also we can't be a victim of this. None of us can be, and none of us are, and creating that energy, but we definitely don't want to be, and we want to check ourselves anytime you might feel that within it. And meaning that this is happening to us, no doubt about it, but we can't just put our arms in the air and be like, well, nothing I can do between now and the end of the year. So I may not be in the place of plan, although my organization plans several events, but my business and my speaking and my connecting with people like you requires there to be events, and it requires that not only connecting virtually, but maybe in person. And so what if I just kind of threw my arms up and said, well, I can't do my job, and so I just won't do my job. And so what I urge us to do is, first, step one is to step back and say, what's the big picture in this? Because you may not be in charge of what's happening in the environment, but you are in charge of the goal for which you were hired, or for which you created the business that you run, or any of those pieces. So because I can't argue with you that we can't make people come to events. We can't make people comfortable with different types of environments, whether it's social distancing or virtual, et cetera. But we are in charge of taking a look at the goals that we want to achieve and how we can find new ways to achieve that. So from a current organization perspective and growing within that. The second bullet that will pop up here is around defining those tangible results. So if we take a step back and we say, we're going to think big, and we're going to remind ourselves that even if we don't have control of what's happening in the environment, and trust me, being a control freak of sorts, or like a closeted control freak, can I even be in the closet control freak? If you know me, then you know that it's probably not even something I hide very well. But wanting to be in control of everything, and I can't be, taking a step back and saying, okay, what's my ultimate goal? And then defining a tangible result around that. So Tammy did a great job of outlining it as what's your value, right? And then the associated, then what's your values, even more than that. So when you define some of that from a personal leadership standpoint, now frame it to what's your value proposition to the organization. So whether it's your current organization that you want to keep with, or future organization. And if you are on furlough, things are taken out of your hands even more, start thinking about what that value proposition is. Why were you hired? What goal, what need are you filling? What goal are you there to achieve? And I think that the more we can focus on the big picture organizational goals or the client goals of what the events or different things it is that you're in charge of, and then reimagine what that could be. Take a look at profitability opportunities. Is that particular event profitable? What could we do right now to shift that? Let me give you an example. We conduct strategic planning sessions. So those are sessions with different organizations, executive team boards, and we always do it in person, and it's always in the fall, and it's always, A, B, C, D. And so we are now using this as an opportunity to say, Why? Why is it always in the fall? Why does it always look just like this? Why does this event happen like that? And how can we create additional profitability out of it? So once we do get to the new normal, and maybe we won't go 100% back to in-person, and so how can we make some of those shifts? How can we examine these events and opportunities that we have to hit the same goal, i.e. deliver education, i.e. offer a trade floor opportunity in business, i.e. small meeting, and then also bring people together in a different way. So on the third one, the final piece there is where focus goes, energy flows. So it's kind of like those three, and then the next three will kind of take it to a next level. But we think big, we find that result, and then recognize where your focus goes, your energy is flowing. Tony Robbins said it first, and it's this idea of what you're giving yourself to is what is getting the best of you. And so if we're focusing on things that are happening in the industry, if we're focusing on the fact that things were canceled versus what we're going to do instead, because that's one of the things one of my teammates said to me recently. They said, well, now that's canceled, then here's this income. And I go, no, if that's canceled, that means that our time and energy that would be spent towards that could be spent towards something else. And sometimes cancellations take just as much time as planning. Clearly, I get it. But in the process of that, trying to reimagine and recognize that where we're spending our time and energy, even mentally, even to ourselves, of feeling different things, that energy is going to flow towards that. Halfway, and this is a personal thing just for me, halfway through this quarantine, I thought to myself, what do I want to achieve before this is over? I first went into it going, oh no, what do I do about? And now I've gotten to the frame of mind of, if this were to end tomorrow and I had to get back on an airplane or I had to jump into planning that event, what do I wish I would have achieved while I had this time in this different environment? And so recognizing that energy. The fourth one that should pop up is investing in communication skills, and we're going to dive into that a little bit here. It is the time for communication. People want to know what's happening. The next one, number 5, is around building and maintaining relationships. Tammy said it great there. She termed it as keeping the connection warm. I cannot urge you that enough, that keep your connections out there. Reach out to your go-to speakers. Reach out to your go-to sponsors. Talk about how we can work together in this new environment, what it is that we want to do. Have some Zoom chats that don't have purpose other than keep, having that connection and really building and maintaining those relationships as we go. And the final, this slide here, number 6, is be confident in that. Absolutely with humility, absolutely in understanding and recognizing what everybody is going through and the fact that the storm is impacting each of us differently. But we've got to be confident in ourselves. You were hired for a reason. You are good at your job for a reason. Don't forget that just because now the environment has shifted. Next slide, please. This is the list for you of factors of advancement. So if you start thinking about in your organization or outside, what do I need to think about? This is the best place to do an assessment of that. This is the best place for you to examine where your gaps might be. And if you do have a little bit more time on your hands, some of us do, some of us don't, that we can frame it a different way. What is our experience? And the experience that we've had in the industry. Some of you are putting that you've been in the industry 20, 30 years, and that, so you have experience and you've exhausted that factor for advancement. Then taking a look at our emotional intelligence. And what is our leadership style? Are we good in executive decision making? Are we better on-site event management? Are we better in the planning process? Are we better in just running a team that handle things? What is our emotional intelligence? How are we reaching those individuals, and how can we benefit and prosper based on that? Financial knowledge is different than budgeting. Financial knowledge is more, how does your event impact revenue for the organization? How does your event impact the financials from a marketing exposure standpoint for the organization? What is the scenario exposure, contingency planning, anything around what would happen if in sponsorships, etc. Business acumen, then, in the way that differs, is the strategy around things. That's your budget, that's your forecast, that's the people that it takes to run an event, that's people it takes to run your division, your organization, your departments. Education, pretty self-explanatory. Is what I love about this organization we're working with today, is offering these opportunities to continue that education. It's industry designation. It's also continuing designations that you have outside, and whether it's grad, undergrad, any place that you might have a gap there, it's a good time to take a look at that. Number 6 is around involvement and influence. This is how known you are. Do people know who you are? I think I know everybody in my industry, but does everybody in my industry know who I am? And what can I be doing around that? And I think that Tammy talked about the social media piece, that putting ourselves out there in positive ways, making sure that that messaging matches our personal brand, and all of those, that involvement includes that. This includes your relationships, your affinities. It also includes any geographic or client understanding that you might come to the table with. It could be your volunteering. We heard about Nicole and her passion for helping women in leadership. So all of those different pieces would fall into this influence. How easy, if you picked up the phone, what could you make happen that nobody else makes happen? And how does that add to that value proposition we were talking about? And then number 7 there, your ability to communicate, advocate for yourself, and negotiate for yourself trumps everything. You could be the best candidate, the best employee ever, and not be able to articulate that effectively and lose a job, lose an opportunity. And I see that happen all the time, where a candidate is would be a beautiful add to the organization and then can't effectively communicate that. And that's even harder now that we're in this virtual environment. Are we able to get our point across? Are we able to get our energy across, our impact? And taking a look at all of those pieces. Hop on a Zoom call with somebody that can critique the heck out of you before you get on with a potential client or before you get on with your organization. Being aware of how engaged we are. If this is all you know about me, what is it that you're getting and gleaming from that? And being very conscious and aware and engaged in everything and how we communicate. If we go to the final slide here, I also want to leave you with these thoughts of, if you want to stay in your organization, recognize that your boss has a hand in that. So if you're the CEO and you have a small board, and you can just put the different ones up there for me, Christine, if you would. There's 5 bullets that you can pop up to neutral social presence, that essentially these are the things to take a look at to manage your boss. And even if you are the boss, there's investors, clients, boards that may be above you, or maybe you have a division lead and you're running a team. Their impact and their relationship with you is critical for your future. You cannot, they're the ones that sign the paycheck, they're the ones that make sure that you're moving forward. So connecting with them, create the future with them together. Use those tools, maybe share the things when you go through the activity and exercise that Tammy taught us. Share those with your boss when you get the chance. Have a coaching call and make her or him or them look good in the process of that. How can you help them achieve their goals? I ask my boss that all the time. What's the one thing in an ideal situation that I could help you achieve in this? Over communicating right now, especially in this environment, because it's the only way and connection that you have. I can't pop down to somebody's office. You can't take a look at everyone's face in a virtual event like you can an in-person event. You can't add brownies to make everybody happy in a virtual event that you could. That's what we need. We need like a brownie button in events, I feel like. But those are the moments where all those things that you used to be able to do to over-communicate that. And respect the legacy that was there. So if someone keeps going, but we have to have our strategic planning in person, respect that that was the legacy that got us to where we are right now, and then be able to offer an opportunity of profitability and future growth. The neutral social presence, I wanted to leave you with this as we transition to Nicole here. And that is making sure that what you are displaying externally, what you're displaying in your little window box of Zoom, or you're displaying on Facebook or any social, your organization's social, that is now representing you. And for someone that's meeting you for the first time virtually, that's all they know about you. And so making sure that this is communicating the energy, the brand, the experience that you want people to have with you. Typically, if 2 months ago, if you were to caught me on a Zoom call, I would have multitasked. I would have not paid attention. I definitely wouldn't have turned my video on. I would have done all these different things that now I'm very conscious about doing, because this is all we get. This is part of the relationship that we have. And if I can't impress you in person, how is it that I'm going to be able to have an effective conversation here, and paying attention to all of that neutral, not being too political, expressing the things that we want to express via our virtual and social presence. So I'd like to either open it to questions or transition straight to Nicole, depending on where we're at.
Sure. Randy, this is Chris. So first of all, I've sent your suggestion about a brownie button to the good folks at Zoom, and I do hope that soon they will get on top of that, because they are very responsive, I've found. One question in particular that I'd like to ask you, and then there are a couple of questions at the end that I'd like each of you to comment on. But specifically, since you talked about those skills, what are some tips from your perspective about translating the more traditional planner and event management skills to our new environment as people are working on their resumes or they're trying to, share information about themselves?
Yeah, if we are trying to work on our resume, or I would still go through those factors of advancement. So those 7 things, make sure we get the handout and have those, and go through like an experience. You may want to focus on event size, virtually event size, in person, and start to break that down, because people may be looking for that forward thinking. I also want to get out of the habit, for those of us that aren't as tech savvy, of saying, oh, I don't do that Snapchat stuff, I don't do those, and start saying that it's not okay to say you don't understand things anymore, because this environment is shifting. Sometimes I have to ask my first grader how to work certain things. But I think that framing our mind of if this is how the world is going to continue, what do I need to improve on in my skills, and taking a look at that. But our resume should display each of those factors. So if your resume doesn't currently share your emotional intelligence or your ability to self-manage, self-regulate, have empathy with your team and staff, work on your cover letter, share a story within that, make sure you have a reference that could offer that. Same with the financial knowledge, the education. If you have a big list of education, then move beyond it. You don't need to reference it in your writing pieces, because that's some of the things that, with, like, for example, in my career with my doctorate, that speaks for itself, right? And so I wouldn't, in answering questions, say, well, in year 3 of my doctorate, I did, because it's there, it's spoken for. Now I can focus on those other areas that may not be attributed to things in my experience that are as that obvious. This also happens for people that have job titles that don't speak for themselves. I did recently work with a VP of Awesomeness. Super cool title. We loved it. It matches her energy. Nobody knows what the heck she does. And so I think use your time, use those writings as a way to explain what needs to be explained, and not overdo the stuff that people will be able to gather on their own. Hope that helps.
Super. Thank you very much, Brandy. And I'm hoping that Amy will let me rewrite my title to be Vice President of Awesomeness. I'm going to ask for
I'll
that.
put in a good word for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, on to Nicole. Thank you so much.
Good day and welcome, everyone. It's awesome to see all of us coming together today, and a huge shout out to EIC for hosting such an important conversation. As I'm watching the chat box, I think that so many of us have similar questions around our industry and how it's going to look going forward. So my hope is to take some of the really important and key concepts that Tammy and Brandy shared and ground some of that within our industry. So it was quite by accident that I ended up in the events industry. It's not something that I intentionally set out to do, but here it is now almost 20 years later, and I can't imagine doing anything else. And I'm still just as passionate today about creating meaningful event experiences for people as I was 20 years ago. So for all of you who are wondering, will this industry still be here? What will we look like in the future? Will I still have a job? My personal belief is yes. I think that there have been so many times, for example, when the 2008 financial crisis hit, people said live events are going away. People won't be able to afford them anymore. I particularly work in the financial sector. And so there was this huge belief that everyone would migrate online. And when webinars began to flood the market, again, people pondered, would we really still meet in person? And the answer is yes, because there's something really different that happens when we meet together in person. And so when we have the ability to get together again, I do believe it will return. However, I believe it will return quite differently. Next slide, please. So I don't know about the rest of you, but for myself, I can't tell you how many times I've heard in the last few months, I can't even imagine thinking long-term right now. And to be honest, I have said that myself. And yet now we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. and it's imperative that we begin to think about how we can re-meet again, so to speak. So I just would like to share a report that came out from the Events Industry Council in 2017 that shared, just for giving context for all of us, that the events industry at that time, just in the last couple of years, had 1.5 billion participants across more than 180 countries. And that generated more than $1.07 trillion, with a T, of direct spending, and was supporting 10.3 million jobs directly. So I absolutely believe that the work that we do is essential to how business gets done. So as you can see on this slide, the way in which we meet and the way in which our jobs will require us to pivot is changing. So one of the things that is really forefront right now is crisis management. And in any crisis management process, the post-crisis steps of recovery and learning are so essential. And that's true more than ever right now. So I encourage all of you to think about, just as Brandy said, if all of this were to end today, what would I want to have had accomplished? Think about what are the learnings from COVID-19 that will allow us to proactively prioritize excellence in safety and security. And what I mean by that is, 6 months ago, if you would have asked me as a planner what kept me up at night around safety and security with regard to live events, it would have been concern of a violent attack taking place and how to mitigate that risk. Today, I'm thinking about what are the protocols of safety and security that I will need to think about and put in place for people to feel comfortable and confident coming back together to convene once again. Similarly, as we've had a huge loss of the number of live events and obviously an explosion in virtual, I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel like I live on Zoom these days. We will at some point return to live events. So as you're working in the virtual space, I urge you to think about what are the lessons and the learnings from virtual that I can take back to live once they're there and be able to apply those principles. So it's not as if we aren't still learning and practicing and having experiences that we can take back. I would venture to guess that we'll see a lot more hybrid events going forward. The fact that we're connecting around the world through this conversation right now is hugely beneficial. The voices, the conversation is really valuable. So how will we bring that back into our live events? Similarly, I really look at negotiation and partnerships. For me, I looked at my role as an event planner as being really, how can I negotiate the win for my organization? How can I ensure and protect that we're not hurt and damaged? And yet, I really believe that's a short-term goal and a short-term win. What I'm seeing now is the value of partnerships. So if I'm sitting down at the table with you and we're both in a place of huge uncertainty about what's going to go forward, if we can openly share and have empathy around where we are and what our goals are, to me, that's the long-term win. So I'm looking to move from just a negotiation position of me and my organization to a win-win for both sides. Loss of jobs. So many of you have posted questions in the Q&A around uncertainty about what our industry will look like going forward. I can say that the reason it feels, I think, so unsettled right now is that our industry has had either short-term or long-term a loss of more than 50% of our jobs through COVID-19. So that feeling of concern is real. It's higher than most any other industry out there. And so what I think is critical right now is, as we move back into growing the number of events that we hold, it will take time for the economy to return. It could be the end of 2021. It could be longer, but I would look to understand how you can become what I call a work from home warrior and a freelance ninja. And what I mean by that is, most likely we will be required to work on leaner teams, be flexible in our job opportunities. And so to the degree to which we're able to do what we do in more ways and more styles creates greater opportunity for all of us. And finally, loss of revenue. And Brandy spoke a little bit about this as well. For the short term, many of our businesses have accepted some level of loss. We've said, okay, for this time period, we're refunding money back to everyone. We're not holding this event. We'll be okay making it through this year with a few cuts. But that's for the short term. So for the long term, we will need, as event professionals, to come up with new and creative ways in which we bring revenue into our organization, whether that's the way in which we structure our registration and pricing models. It could be how we garner sponsorships. I'd love for any of you who have come up with some really fun and creative ways to think about new models of revenue for your organization, if you'd be willing to pop that in the chat just to get some ideas going. I was on a call with some fellow event professionals recently, and we thought, well, maybe the tote bag's going away, but the llama on the Zoom call, that's a great sponsorship opportunity. So sometimes out of those really playful ways, it generates ideas about new and creative ways to bring revenue to our company. And if you're feeling really stuck around what that might look like, I'd encourage you to think about, usually those new and creative models come from creating value for one or more of your stakeholder groups. So think about who those people and who those groups are, and think about what they most need right now. And it looks like we've got a number of fun ideas beginning to come into the chat already. So please keep those coming. And while we do that, next slide, please. So as you know, I think we sit with a tremendous amount of upheaval within our industry. One of the ways to be most resilient to the changes is to look to modernize your skill set. So research shows that those people who have invested time and energy into learning how to be ready and willing to be ready for the inevitable changes that will come our way, find pivoting easier and less stressful. So rather than resisting the change, and again, for those of you who have multiple decades of experience in our industry, and for myself who is getting close to that 20-year mark, it's incredibly important that we're willing to continue to modernize and add things to our toolkit, so to speak. So some of the ways that I think that we can address that: one, in your role, what skills are needed for today's environment? Not the environment on January 1, 2020, but today's environment, and how can you grow that? So I can share that it was just 10 weeks ago, mid-March, when I was 6 weeks out from our association's largest and most revenue producing event for our company. I was in the throes of managing a sold out room block, finalizing menu selections, working with speakers to ensure that we were ready for our multi-day event. And within 2 weeks, we completely shut that event down. So then we quickly were pivoting to looking at how we were going to move our remaining programs from the year and which of those programs we would move to virtual. So we went from being immersed into how to be excellent at a live event to within a couple weeks having to ramp up quickly on how to produce virtual events. So how can you grow that? Also, what makes you relevant? The value proposition slide that Tammy shared really encapsulates all of that. And also what makes you interesting. The pieces of you that are unique to you are what are memorable for other people and are what you can bring to your event. And lastly, I encourage you to get smarter about one thing that's current and relevant for today's marketplace. So as we transition to the next slide, I'd ask all of you to just take a moment now to write down, either in the chat box or for yourself personally, what are 1 or 2 skills that you'd like to grow in the next 6 months that would help modernize your skill set? Great. And so finally, as we take in all of the ideas and suggestions and information from today, I'd like to look at just a few pitfalls that tend to come up, because if you're putting all of this time and focus into having a more strategic career plan and you're not seeing the results that you'd hope for, it's very likely that one of these might be coming into play. And I'm distracted and excited by all of the skill sets and new things that people want to learn that are being popped into the chat. So please keep those coming. So as far as pitfalls go, developing a plan that's not actually strategic. So if you were to hand your plan to someone else, they should be able to easily identify what are you trying to accomplish, in what time frame, what would success look like. And then similarly, know when to use experts. If it's time for you to freshen up your headshot on LinkedIn, maybe rather than using your selfie stick or a friend or child, maybe it's time to hire a professional photographer to do that. And then certainly in today's environment, it is incredibly easy to get distracted by daily tasks. On top of that, when you think about your projects at work, there's probably someone or some team members that you're committing to in some way to get something done, or you have an event that has a defined date that it needs to be completed by. In this process, I encourage you to find ways to create accountability so that you're not distracted by daily tasks so that it doesn't get done. For myself personally, I have an accountability partner, and we get together twice a month, and it holds us accountable to our goals and making progress on them. As you do this, it's really valuable to not create a plan based on shoulds. So if the plan isn't meaningful to you, if it's what you think you should be doing, then it's not going to be very inspiring to you. So as you go through the process of creating that and defining a more meaningful plan, it's very possible that you could use a process like creating a vision board or a bucket list or some type of dream list of all the things that you want to do. But be careful that that wish list isn't the end of your approach, that you then create a strategy around that. Because back to Tammy's comment, the wish in and of itself doesn't accomplish anything. And lastly, this isn't a process that we'll complete on today's call, or that you'll complete in an afternoon and stick on a shelf and not revisit. It's something that requires frequent revision, frequent coming back to, looking for those stuck points, and then being able to rework it. So with that, those are some of the common pitfalls that I've often experienced and seen for others. If you have others that you've experienced that you find slow you down. Again, I encourage you to share that with the group that's on our call today as well. And with that, Chris or Christine, I'd be happy to turn it back over to you for questions. In this final slide, I encourage all of you, please reach out until we're able to meet back in person and provide personal handshakes and hugs. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to hear what you're all up to.
Terrific, and thank you all. And as you know, we see that the questions come through in the chat. One of the things that remains a recurring theme, whether it's shifting from, the more traditional skills to the virtual, that all the things that folks are mentioning in the chat, some tips about articulating your value as a professional. And if each of you could give us a couple of seconds of your thoughts on that, that would be great. And Nicole, why don't we start with you?
Great. So I think when you focus on articulating your value, it's important that, in my estimation, that we look at the post-event process just as thoroughly as the pre-event and during event process. It's incredibly important as we're wrapping things up to feed back what has happened to our stakeholders. So part of that value is personal, but part of it is what we're producing. So if you're not taking the time to share back with your stakeholders, whether that's sponsors, your company, your attendees, what has happened and how that was meaningful for people, I would encourage you to add that step to your process.
Super, thank you. Brandy, what about you?
It was even popping up to tell me that I was on mute. I love technology these days. So one of the things I was just thinking about that Nicole said really well about taking a look at your skill set and asked everyone and seeing the chat from everybody about things that they want to broaden. So I would say broadening the skill set is a way to continue to build value while we articulate it. Articulating in general is saying yes as much as possible, listening to the feedback, as Nicole just said, and then I also think we should utilize multiple channels of communication, utilize multimedia as a way to broaden your articulation. So if you have a conversation via Zoom, follow up and recap that conversation in email. If you're talking via email, recommend a phone call or include a voice message, and allowing for that ultimate communication of that. And then finally asking, and so seeing how it is that you can, so soliciting as Nicole was talking about too, soliciting for the value proposition and how you can ultimately achieve.
Terrific, thank you. And Tammy, to you.
Yeah, it's such great comments. And I do think a huge part of it is understanding where your successes are and making sure it's very clear that you've had those successes. So whether it's via email, conversation, whatever that looks like. The other side of it that's really important is understanding what values are most important to you as you think about what you're bringing to the table, and make sure those get regularly integrated into your conversation with your boss and your leadership, so they know this is the benefit of having you on that team, whatever your unique selling proposition is for yourself, right? Kind of driving that point home.
Terrific. And for our last couple of minutes here, if each of you would take a moment and just share some comments or wisdom, as you have been doing all hour, but just some thoughts and encouragement to our participants and our attendees around the globe about what's coming in the future to help them take heart. And Tammy, could we start with you?
Yeah, I was trying to answer some questions in the Q&A, and I kept seeing the recurring, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? And I think Nicole said it effectively, right? The events aren't going away. It's just how are they going to evolve and change over time. And I think this is such a beautiful opportunity for all of us right now to figure out, to brainstorm creatively, what is going to happen next, and how do you position yourself for what's next? Become an expert in virtual, become an expert in, creative planning, whatever those things are. Take this time now to really hone and enhance the things that you've enjoyed doing and bring those to life in a new and meaningful way.
Thank you, Tammy. Brandy, what about you?
My mantra in a moment like this is to learn, love, and kick booty. And we talked all about the learning and the opportunities and the place and how to make it objective, to love, to build relationships, to love yourself in this process, and that's so important. And then to get out there and kick some booty. If something has occurred, your job is furloughed, your organization is shut down, that's happened now. And as difficult as it is to practice emotional intelligence, practice resilience, and look at it objectively and say, okay, based on the current situation, now what? And how am I going to make something happen?
Thank you. And Nicole?
My takeaway would be that regardless of your title and how that may be changing in the work that you're doing or the loss of a position, if you have a passion for curating experiences for people, if you're lit up by what you do, this industry needs you, we love you, and we will be here in some way, and it will be so beneficial to have as many of us rowing in this boat together to envision what the future will look like and to help bring people into that new version of events together. So I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's rich with opportunities. Doesn't mean that it doesn't feel uncertain or unsettled, but I encourage you to pick up the oar and stay in the boat with all of us together. So thanks for having us today, and thanks for everyone's time.
Thank you. And Christine, any final comments, please?
Well, I just was going to say thank you again for sharing so many of valuable tools for each of us. This is a very special community, the Certified Meeting Professionals, the CMP community. We're strong and we care, and we will get through this together. I know we will, and as everyone here has said, it will be with change. But we are most hopeful at the EIC and the CMP Commission that we will be part of the forefront of the change. So I really appreciate everyone being on today's call. I really appreciate the three of you and Chris, of course, and her team. And we're looking forward to what the future will be and getting through that together.
Thank you, Christine, and thanks again to all of our panelists. As Derek said at the top of the hour, the CE certificates will be available in just about 1 week, and we will have this posted in our Learning Center. And we appreciate your time being with us. Thanks for sharing your expertise, and thanks to all of our attendees for their great feedback and support.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Be safe.
Have a wonderful day all.